Good evening. On behalf of Toronto's Hiroshima-Nagasaki Day Coalition, I welcome you to the commemoration of the 77th anniversary of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, titled Global Alert, Canada, Sign the Ban Treaty. My name is Rosemary Keenan. I am the co-chair of the HNDC, along with Dr. Vinay Jindal, and I am pleased to be your host for this evening. Once again, HNDC members have worked with determination and hope throughout the year to bring the message of nuclear disarmament to all Canadians and to prepare this evening's webinar. Without government or corporate sponsorship, we rely on our donors. As a community group, we do not give charitable tax receipts. That means that every dollar that is donated is hard-earned money. Every dollar carries with it a belief in our efforts, a hope for a nuclear weapons-free future, and every dollar is valued and appreciated. I would like to thank all our member organizations, International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, Canada, Japanese Canadian Cultural Centre, Pax Christi Toronto, Science for Peace, Toronto Buddhist Church, Toronto Article 9, and Toronto Area Interfaith Council. I would also like to thank our sponsors and supporters, Canadian Coalition for Nuclear Responsibility, Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, Canadian Pugwash Group, Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, Conscience Canada, National Association of Japanese Canadians, Greater Toronto NAJC, Peace Magazine, Peace Quest, and Project Save the World. Thank you as well to all the individuals who donate what they can to ensure Toronto has a commemoration every year. We are grateful this evening to Rachel Small, Maya Garfinkel, and Greta Zaro, all of World Beyond War, for their technical expertise in hosting this webinar. Following the presentations by our speakers, Dr. Vinay Jindal will moderate a 10 to 15-minute question and answer period. At that time, we encourage you to post your questions in the chat. Questions for our speakers. We will hear from all three speakers before the Q&A. The Hiroshima-Nagasaki Day Coalition is an opportunity for local peace and community groups to come together, share ideas, and give a grassroots voice to Toronto peace community. A voice among all the wonderful voices that strive to make Toronto a better place and to make the world a better place. As we reflect on the horrors of the atomic bombings and the devastation of nuclear weapons testing, we are faced with the reality that we are living in the most dangerous of times, but we look forward with hope. The global community is gaining momentum in support of the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We urge our own government in Canada to respond to the will of the majority of its citizens who desire a world free of nuclear weapons. I welcome you to the 77th anniversary commemoration of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bombings. Global Alert, Canada, sign the Nuclear Ban Treaty. I would now like to invite Dr. Barbara Burkett to read the land acknowledgement.
Barbara, you can now unmute.
We acknowledge today that we are in the dish with one spoon territory, which encompasses Southern Ontario from the Great Lakes to Quebec and from Lake Simcoe into the US. It is the result of a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. The treaty implies that we all eat out of the dish, all of us that share this territory, with only one spoon, taking care of the land and its creatures. Importantly, there are no knives at the table, representing that we must keep the peace. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome again this year the inspiring music of Toronto's Grammy-nominated Japanese-Canadian flautist, Ron Korb. Ron studied flute in Toronto and Japan, and also has traveled widely to discover and play many indigenous woodwind instruments. He's produced many albums, won numerous awards. He's performed for Queen Elizabeth and the Dalai Lama's World Festival of Sacred Music, amongst other events. Welcome, Ron, and the sounds of your flutes as you help set the tone of this year 77 commemoration.
Thank you, Ron, for that wonderful musical presentation from you and your expert team, a clear example of what can happen when we come together in harmony.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Rosemary. It's really an honor for me to be here again for the 77th anniversary of the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Day commemoration. And the piece you just heard was a piece called Saint Johann, obviously after Saint Johann Sebastian Bach. And now I'd like to play a piece with this instrument. It's called the Bansuri. It's from India. And this year I was involved with a Grammy-winning project called Divine Tides with Ricky Kaj and also the drummer from the Police, the rock band The Police, Stuart Copeland. And after we won, Ricky sent me a whole set of these Indian bamboo flutes. So I'd like to play a piece and give you an idea of the sound. And this piece is called Morning Hope. Thank you. And now I'd like to play a video that's actually from that album that I was talking about, Divine Tides, again with Stuart Copeland from The Police and Ricky Kaj from India. And again, it's a great honor for me to be involved in this event every year. And just to let you know, at the very end, you're going to hear this instrument and also this shinobue from Japan in the lantern ceremony, the shakuhachi, and the one you'll hear it on the track. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ron. I would now like to invite. And I would now like to invite, thank you again, Ron. I would now like to invite Reverend Earl Smith of Toronto Area Interfaith Council to introduce Bishop Shaw.
Thank you, Rosemary. With Métis family roots, Bishop Rusilla Shaw grew up on a small farm, learning from the land. She earned a Master of Divinity from Wycliffe College in 1999, and following a few years of youth ministry, she was ordained deacon and then priest in 2001. She was ordained a bishop on 2017, and her ministry has been inspired by Desmond Tutu with the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. and she has served as a witness and ambassador for the Anglican Church for Canada's National Truth and Reconciliation Commission. She also serves on the Jubilee Commission and was a member of the Primates Commission on Discovery, Reconciliation, and Justice. She is connected into justice work and community building and is actively involved in working with the National Indigenous Anglican Church in reconciliation with the colonial church. So please welcome Bishop Priscilla Shaw.
Hello. Today we gather with hope for the earth in our hearts and peace in the front of our minds. We give thanks for many things and we pray for many things. Creator, thank you for this day you have given us. Thank you for calling us to gather here, and we ask you to enter where we are so that your teachings will work in us. Thank you for the desire you give us to respond with non-violence, to work for a future with a hope. Thank you for gifting us with conscience, with community, for support, with commitment and perseverance. Thank you for rage, for righteous anger, that we might tap into it to change the world. We ask for a conversion of hearts, that people with influence will come to see the preciousness of life on this fragile earth, our island home. We ask your continued blessing, especially upon Hibakushas, both the people and also the plants and creatures, all affected by nuclear war and its devastating effects. We are all related. Give us strength and courage for all the people connected across and around the world to the tragedy that must not ever happen again in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In the words of Setsuko Thurlow, don't give up, keep pushing. See the light? Crawl towards it. Our light now is the ban treaty. This day, let us follow each other out of the dark night of nuclear terror. No matter what obstacles we face, we will keep moving and keep pushing and keep sharing this light with others. This is our passion and commitment for our one precious world to survive. From Setsuko Thurlow. From a resource called A Call to Worship for the Weary and the Wary. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are struggling hard and carrying heavy loads." From the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 28. So we come with all our weariness and wariness, our weariness with injustice, our weariness with fake news, our weariness with a world that seems determined to be hostile rather than welcoming, our weariness of what it might mean to truly live out our call, our weariness of how vulnerable our desire for openness might make us, our wariness of how safe it is to trust where trust has so often been misplaced. Come and find not just rest for your souls, but channels for your rage. I share with you now a prayer with the 7 grandfather teachings from the people of the land here on Turtle Island, the indigenous name for this continent. We ask, Creator, for wisdom so that we will know what is good in this world. We ask for love so we can spread your love everywhere. We ask for respect so that we will know that everyone comes from one place, from you. We ask for bravery so that we will not be afraid to do your work here. We ask for honesty so that no one will lie or harm any one of us. We ask for humility so that no one will be superior to another. And, Lord of life and blessing, we ask for truth so that we will see you in the future on the last day with clean hearts and spirits. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop Shaw, for those wonderful words of hope and encouragement. Now we will hear from Mayor John Tory with this year's City of Toronto proclamation for Hiroshima and Nagasaki Day.
Hello, Mayor John Tory here. This year marks the 77th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On August 6th, we honor those who lost their lives in those bombings and remember the utter devastation caused by the atomic bombs. We also acknowledge the necessity of finding nonviolent solutions for world issues and support the abolition and prohibition of nuclear weapons. This recognition holds great significance here in Canada, highlighting the importance of having Canada join the many nations that have signed the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in the hopes of working towards the elimination of nuclear weapons. Here in Toronto, City Council has unanimously called upon the Canadian government to support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which would help create a safer, nuclear weapons-free world. And we are committed in Toronto to showing support for Japanese Canadians who continue to face sustained effects of this historical tragedy. Inspired by the Peace Memorial in Hiroshima, I'm pleased that the City of Toronto established the Peace Garden in Nathan Phillips Square as a lasting expression of that solidarity. As we reflect on these horrific chapters in world history, we're reminded of the necessity to firm up our resolve to act in ways in which we'll achieve peace around the world. I hope you'll do that. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Reverend Earl Smith of Toronto Area Council to bring greetings from Mayor Kazumi Matsui of Hiroshima and Mayor Tomohisa Taue of Nagasaki, with messages from the 2022 Peace Declaration. This will be followed by a moment of silence in commemoration of the immense suffering and loss of life that occurred in these two cities.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Here are some excerpts from both the Hiroshima mayor, and then I'll follow with the Nagasaki mayor. The mayor of Hiroshima states in his peace declaration, he says, in invading Ukraine, the Russian leader elected to protect the lives and property of his people is using them as instruments of war, stealing the lives and livelihoods of innocent civilians in another country. Around the world, the notion that peace depends on nuclear deterrence gains momentum. These errors betray humanity's determination, born of our experiences of war, to achieve a peaceful world free from nuclear weapons. To accept the status quo and abandon the ideal of peace maintained without military force is to threaten the very survival of the human race. We must stop repeating these mistakes. Above all, entrusting a nuclear button to any world leader is to sanction continued nuclear threats to humanity and potential recreation of the hellscape of August 6, 1945. We must immediately render all nuclear buttons meaningless. Earlier this year, the 5 nuclear weapon states issued a joint statement, quote, nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. They further declared their intent to, quote, remain committed to our nuclear non-proliferation treaty obligations. Having issued such a statement, why do they not attempt to fulfill their promises? Why do some even hint at using nuclear weapons? The nuclear powers must now act to build bridges of trust among nations, rather than treating a world without nuclear weapons like a distant dream. They should be taking concrete steps towards its realization. And now, some experts from the mayor of Nagasaki in his peace declaration. He says, in January this year, the leaders of the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, France, and China released a joint statement affirming that a, quote, nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. However, the very next month, Russia invaded Ukraine. Threats of using nuclear weapons have been made, sending shivers throughout the globe. This has shown the world that the use of nuclear weapons is not a, quote, groundless fear. but a tangible and present crisis. It has made us confront the reality that as long as there are nuclear weapons in the world, humankind constantly faces the risk that nuclear weapons might be used due to mistaken human judgments, mechanical malfunctions, or in acts of terrorism. I hereby appeal, he says later on, to the government of Japan and members of the National Diet. As a nation with a constitution that renounces war, Japan must exercise leadership in pursuing peace diplomacy within international society, especially during times of peace. As a nation possessing the three non-nuclear principles, instead of moving towards, quote, nuclear sharing or other forms of dependency on nuclear weapons, please lead the way in debate that will achieve progress in the direction of non-nuclear dependency, such as promoting discussions on the Northeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone concept. Furthermore, as the only nation to have suffered wartime atomic bombings, I request the government of Japan to sign and ratify the Treaty for the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and become a propellant force in the achievement of a world free of nuclear weapons. Our civil society can become either a keystone to peace or a hotbed of war. Instead of a, quote, culture of war that spreads distrust, fans terror, and seeks to resolve matters through violence, let us make untiring efforts to ingrain in civil society a, quote, culture of peace, unquote, that spreads trust, respects others, and seeks resolutions through dialogue. Let each and every one of us who demands peace adopt the slogan of the Hiroshima-Nagasaki peace messengers, quote, our strength may be modest, but we're not powerless, unquote. Thank you. And that is all. And now for a minute of silence.
I would now like to invite Sister Mary Ellen Francoeur of Pax Christi Toronto to introduce Setsuko Thurlow.
Mary Ellen, you can unmute yourself
Yes.
now.
Right, thank you. We are always privileged to welcome Setsuko Thurlow. As one of the living hibakusha, survivors of the bombing of Hiroshima in 1945, Setsuko, from age 13, has dedicated her life to the elimination of nuclear weapons. Around the world, she continues to speak out strongly about the unspeakable danger of nuclear weapons for all of humanity and advocates for their total elimination. Working tirelessly as a member of ICAN the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. She was instrumental in the creation of the landmark United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which became a legally binding instrument in 2021. In 2017, Setsuko co-accepted the Nobel Peace Prize with Beatrice Fine, Executive Director of ICANN. She is a passionate advocate for Canada's signing the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Welcome, Setsuko, and please share your very important message with us.
I was in New York last week observing the United Nations Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, where the world was confronted with the difficult debate and diplomacy. Tonight, back in Toronto, I'm grateful that together with like-minded friends and their friends, to share some thoughts and reflections, pondering the meaning and responsibility of our lives in the midst of the troubled nuclear age. In June this year, in Vienna, Austria, the first meeting of the state parties of the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was held. I was privileged to participate virtually and share my thoughts as a Hiroshima survivor. Tonight, I decided to share with you the same story I shared in Vienna. I titled this story as Survivor's Journey. It is a story of a journey no human beings should ever have to take. A story I have told countless times, but always try and tell for the first time, revisiting a hell I have never left, and seeing afresh a light that has guided me ever since. So, while some of you will have heard my story before, I ask you all to stand with me now. A 13-year-old student assigned to decode secret messages in the Army headquarters in my hometown of Hiroshima. It is early on a beautiful summer morning, not a cloud in the sky. Picture yourself there as a child, turning away blinded by the intense bluish white flash from the window and falling away into silence and darkness. Open your eyes with me as I wake in the silence and darkness, bewildered and pinned under ruins. Imagine that the faint cries you hear, "Mother, help me, God, help me," are those of your dying friends. And then a miracle in hell. Feel a touch on your shoulder and a man's voice begging, "Don't give up, keep pushing. I'm trying to free you. See the light coming through the opening. Crawl towards it as quickly as you can. Can you see me? I am alone. The man has vanished. Hiroshima has vanished. I crawl stand, stare at the flames, watch ghostly procession go by. Beings who used to be human, bleeding, burnt, blackened, swollen, parts of their bodies missing, flesh and skin hanging loose, bellies burst open, intestine hanging, many blinded by the flash, some with eyeballs in their hands. This is how my story began, how the story of humanity in the nuclear age began. But I'm here today to ask not how I journey, not how my journey, but how our journey will end. For the first 6 decades of the nuclear age, the voices of its survivors and the victims in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and in the many indigenous homeland devastated by over 2,000 nuclear test explosions, was silenced and marginalized by nuclear armed states and their allies and accomplices. We continued, of course, to tell our stories and issue our warnings. In Japan and Kazakhstan, in American Southwest and Russian Arctic, in South Pacific and Australia, and in the other places, in North Africa, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, all of them poisoned, polluted, violated by nuclear imperialism. Our journeys and our suffering continued. And there were always people and states who listened, who understood, who cared. But it is only in the last 15 or so years that our voices finally brought through and helped lead the way to what we are all here to celebrate. The platform we must all help to build on, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the opening that can bring to a close the long reign of nuclear terror. What happened? What went right after so much had gone wrong? Perhaps it was the unforgivable failure of the nuclear power to seize the chance for peace and disarmament at the end of the Cold War. Perhaps it was the mockery those powers continue to make of their obligation under the NPT to negotiate nuclear disarmament in good faith. Or perhaps it was the genuine good faith shown by campaigners, activists, young and old, around the world, banding together to say, I can make a difference, to work tirelessly to non-violently overthrow the old order and insist on emerging from the shadow of mushroom cloud. Whatever the reasons for the revolution, it has been a wonder to behold and a joy to be part of. we must not delude ourselves. The old order is still standing, and doomsday clock is still ticking. 100 seconds to midnight. As ICAN campaigners and our brothers and sisters in the global peace movement have eloquently argued, the war in Ukraine makes the case for nuclear abolition more compelling than ever. As I like to say, the only thing nuclear deterrence deters is disarmament, not war. It is clear that Russia's massive nuclear arsenal helped sorry. Can I have the last? I'm sorry. This is I lost stuff. It is clear that Russia's massive nuclear arsenal helped embolden President Putin, that he feels empowered, enabled, and protected by the bomb, by his ability to kill millions of people in seconds. Isn't that evil? Isn't that monstrous? And isn't that what the other nuclear leaders believe as well? The United States, United Kingdom, France, China, and now India, Israel, Pakistan, North Korea, and all the members and supporters of the dangerous nuclear clubs. They seem so afraid to run the risk of nuclear disarmament, but instead they run the terrible risk of nuclear annihilation, not just for themselves, but for everyone on Earth. Maybe they believe their magical safe hands will always be able to control, always be able to command and control the thousands of nuclear weapons right now on high alert, ready to launch in minutes. But they cannot. This is impossible. Nuclear leaders have unsafe minds and hands, and sadly harbor dangerous delusion of power. This is what scares me most about this moment. About, for example, the unseemly rush of the leaders of Finland and Sweden to join NATO's nuclear club without properly asking their people or even themselves what the real costs and dangers might be. It scares me that the horror and the trauma of the war in Ukraine may be used to promote nuclear weapons as protection, to sell them as insurance in the real world of war and warriors. If that happens, then so will a chain reaction of proliferation around the globe, and our great goal of global zero will recede. Just as the TPNW has brought it closer than ever. We cannot allow the big lie of the nuclear age that the bomb offers a shelter from military storms to take hold again. We have to disavow that dangerous myth now before the catastrophic hurricane of nuclear war destroys life on Earth. In the 6 months, in the 6 frightening months since Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, massive increase in military spending and spending on nuclear weapons have been justified as responding to public opinion and concern. And for nearly 5 years, poll after poll in nation after nation, including many nations in NATO, have shown supermajority in the support for our treaty. In my adopted country of Canada, for example, a poll last year showed 74% in favor of signing, in favor of signing. Why did the government of Canada not honor the will of the people and join the TPNW? There are voices in Canadian peace movement calling for a citizens' assembly on nuclear disarmament, empowered to make policy recommendations to Parliament. Such an assembly would hear from all sides of the issue, including from my side as a survivor. No such experiment has ever been attempted before, and I believe it is an idea worth carefully exploring, not just in Canada, but every country that claims the right to possess or rely on these heinous weapons of genocidal destruction. It sickens me that those countries that continue to base their defense on indefensible nuclear violence include the land of my birth, Japan, the only nation so far where nuclear weapons have been used in war. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is from Hiroshima, where next May he will host the G7 summit. He recently told President Biden, there is no other venue as fitting to vow to the world that mankind will never cause the catastrophe brought about by nuclear weapons. But Mr. Prime Minister, you know as well as I do that the only way to ensure that humanity never uses nuclear weapons is for humanity to renounce and abolish them. And so I issue this appeal to Mr. Kishida today. Before you welcome the G7 to Hiroshima, open a national dialogue on the TPNW. Help lead Japan out of the darkness of nuclear dependency and then enable Japan to lead the world toward the light of nuclear-free safety. In 1995, the American poet Caroline Forche visited my hometown and wrote a powerful condemnation of the bomb called The Testimony of Light. After evoking the horror of Hiroshima, she concludes by wondering whether humanity still will take the testimony sufficiently to heart. The worst is over, she writes, but then adds ominously, the worst is yet to come. In my testimony, my many years of reaching for the light of peace and disarmament, I have tried to convey some sense of reality of nuclear war as the worst fate that can befall humanity and the earth. I firmly believe that if we can build on the platform of our beloved new treaty, the worst of the nuclear age may be over. But I fear that if we don't seize the opening, the worst is yet to come and may come soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Setsuko, for your powerful message, and most of all, your determination, which inspires all of us to work for the end of nuclear weapons. I would like now to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Akira Kawasaki. Akira Kawasaki is a member of the executive committee of the Tokyo-based non-governmental organization Peace Boat. He also serves on the international steering group of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Mr. Kawasaki has coordinated the Global Hibakusha Project, in which atomic bomb survivors travel the globe to share their testimony. He has also worked to educate young people, to bring them into the movement for nuclear disarmament through numerous activities, such as the Hiroshima ICANN Academy. Mr. Kawasaki is a highly regarded author on nuclear issues and is respected by NGOs and governments alike, creating international opportunities to take action for disarmament. Mr. Kawasaki was recently awarded the Tanimoto Peace Prize in 2021. Welcome, Mr. Kawasaki.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary, for the kind introduction. And I thank the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Coalition of Toronto for giving me the opportunity to speak on this very special day. Let me express my deep respect and appreciation to the coalition members who have been dedicated for a long time to commemorate the atomic bombing, to recall the message of the Hibakusha, and to advance nuclear disarmament. Also, I'm delighted to speak before Rouge, who I know as a great alumna of the Hiroshima ICANN Academy on Nuclear Weapons and Global Security, representing the younger generation working for the same goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. I'm now talking to you from New York, where the 10th Review Conference of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT, is taking place at the United Nations headquarters. I have participated in the NPT review conferences since 2000, but this year is different. This is because of the clear, real danger that nuclear weapons may be used in Europe. And we know that once a nuclear weapon is used, it will trigger retaliations leading to a nuclear war on a global scale. At the NPT conference, many governments have condemned Russia for its nuclear intimidation of Ukraine. Indeed, the threat or use of nuclear weapons must never be allowed. Legally, it would be contrary to the principles of international humanitarian law, and thus would be criminal. Morally, any move to repeat what the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki experienced 77 years ago, like Setsuko, is wrong. In response, Russia is saying that it is not threatening to use nuclear weapons. They say it is just deterrence. The Russian spokesperson has said that they could use nuclear weapons only when the country faced an existential threat. To this, the US, UK, France are saying, no, Russia is threatening us and it is being irresponsible. They say that they are responsible nuclear armed states. But in fact, the US Secretary of State has said at the NPT conference that his country would, I quote, only consider the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interests of the country, unquote. So, what is the difference? Essentially, all nuclear armed states are getting ready to launch weapons of mass destruction and claiming that they are allowed to do so. This is unacceptable. A major significance of the 2017 Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, is that it categorically prohibits the use of or threat to use nuclear weapons, which is not clearly prohibited by the NPT. Bearing in mind the catastrophic humanitarian consequences that any use of nuclear weapons will bring about, the first meeting of state parties to the TPNW held in Vienna this June called on all nuclear armed states, pending the total elimination of nuclear weapons, to never use or threaten to use these weapons under any circumstances. Since this February, the Peace Board Office in Tokyo has repeatedly contacted by friends in Ukraine who are scared of being attacked with nuclear weapons. They ask us, what would it be like to be attacked with nuclear bombs? How could we escape? How could we protect ourselves? You Japanese should know, so please tell us. Well, this has been so painful because the story told by hibakusha like Setsuko clearly tell us that you simply cannot escape or protect yourself when a nuclear bomb is dropped. That is why the hibakusha have continued to call for the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Let me share a slide now. So last Friday at the NPT conference, an 18-year-old Ukrainian woman named Lisa delivered a statement on behalf of ICAN. She stated, I quote, "Nuclear weapons are killing people in Ukraine even when they are not used because Russia is utilizing nuclear deterrence as a shield to protect its atrocities," unquote. Even if nuclear weapons are not directly used, the threat to use them terrorizes people and prolongs the war of aggression. The reality is today that a great number of people are actually right now being victimized by the threat of nuclear weapons. It is said that Japan is the only country in the world that was attacked by nuclear weapons in wartime. And at the NPT conference, many governments say that the record of non-use of nuclear weapons after Nagasaki must be continued. But we know that Japan is not the only victim of nuclear weapons, and that many people have actually suffered from testing, development, and production of nuclear weapons around the world. Working with global hibakusha, nuclear survivors around the world has been a central theme for Peace Boat since its establishment in 1983. It was not only Japanese who suffered from the atomic bombing. It is said that in Hiroshima, about 10% of the approximately 140,000 people who died by the end of 1945 were Korean. Other victims included American, Dutch, Australian, British, and Canadian prisoners of war, Chinese, including those forcibly taken or mobilized as wartime laborers, and students from Southeast Asia. Those non-Japanese hibakusha were discriminated against in the government assistance and healthcare system after the war. So they had to struggle to secure their own rights as a hibakusha, including through lawsuit cases against the Japanese government. Let me share a slide. Wait a moment, sorry. So today, I would like to pay tribute to Mr. Lee Jong-kun, who courageously gave testimonies of his experience of suffering and discrimination as a Korean hibakusha since he first joined Peace Boat voyage in 2012 and passed away at the end of last month at the age of 93 years. Nuclear tests conducted over 2,000 times around the world have produced massive amount of radioactive fallout, contaminating our oceans, lands, plants, animals, and people, and forcing people to leave their homes. Peace Boat has visited many of those affected communities, including in Maui or French Polynesia, or the Marshall Islands and the Pacific. We have made ties with indigenous people in Australia who have suffered from both uranium mining and nuclear testing. Through our voyages, we have organized programs for the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, their second and third generations, nuclear test victims and their children, together with indigenous people affected by the nuclear chain, to meet and learn from each other. Survivors of the Fukushima nuclear disaster also joined and discussed the challenges they are commonly facing. Disposal of nuclear waste is also a matter of serious concern, as we heard the concern at the NPT review conference over the planned release of treated contaminated water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plants into the Pacific. Also highlighted at the conference was the nuclear power plants present serious security threats in armed conflict, as we see in the scary news from Ukraine. Last December, Peace Boat organized the World Nuclear Survivors Forum in partnership with ICANN. Throughout the two-day online forum, more than 30 nuclear survivors and the supporters from 5 continents joined and shared their stories. Representatives of First Nations of Canada also conveyed their stories of fighting for environmental and social justice, such as against the uranium refinery and incinerator in Canada. In the forum, commonalities were recognized among the survivors of different stages of the nuclear chain. For example, the deep and abiding injuries from radiation are often imposed on marginalized communities, and the silences are driven by colonialism, Cold War secrecy, unequal power, and nuclear racism. Based on that, Japanese NGOs put together their recommendations to state parties to the TPNW related to the assistance of nuclear victims and presented these at the first meeting of state parties in Vienna. We called on state parties to reaffirm that affected individuals must be at the center of discussions on victim assistance and environmental remediation, seeking input from all relevant stakeholders, including a broad range of all those who self-identify as nuclear victims. The goal to leave no one behind must be set. Neither Canada nor Japan has yet signed the TPNW. Opponents to the treaty say that joining the nuclear ban would undermine their security. But you should question whose security and what security they are talking about. They say that it is nuclear deterrence that provides the basis of our national security. But you should remember that the chair's summary of the Vienna Conference on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons, held just prior to the first meeting of the state parties to the TPNW, noted, based on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that, I quote, nuclear weapons do not prevent major war, but rather embolden nuclear armed states to start wars, unquote. In this relation, let me also quote the remarks of the governor of Hiroshima, Yuzaki Hidehiko, at the peace ceremony of Hiroshima on this August 6th. I quote, "The realist who believes that one must meet force with force uphold the theory of nuclear deterrence. It is strange that for some reason, they believe state leaders will make rational decisions and will not use nuclear weapons. This assumption has no logical basis," unquote. It was so disappointing that neither Canada nor Japan participated in the meeting of state parties as an observer. But still, they can change their mind and choose to participate in the second meeting of state parties to be held next November in New York, chaired by Mexico. To prepare for the second meeting, three intersessional working groups has been established to address, firstly, universalization of the treaty, secondly, victim assistance and environmental remediation, and thirdly, nuclear disarmament verifications and the international organization to deal with it. A scientific advisory group was also agreed to be set up. The Vienna Action Plan formally recognized the role of the ICAN and the processes. As civil society, we can and expected to contribute. I was encouraged by Ambassador Norton of Canada, delivering the joint statement at the NPT Review Conference last week on behalf of 67 countries, including Japan, on gender and nuclear weapons. The statement pointed out that, I quote, "Gender perspectives provide key insights into how individuals and groups are differentially impacted by armed conflict and weapons, and gender inclusivity makes better and more effective arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation," unquote. Indeed, the radiation of nuclear weapons has disproportionately impacted women and girls. Canada has a long record as a humanitarian champion in international affairs, and now is leading the discussion of gender and inclusivity and the nuclear debate. Providing assistance to victims of nuclear weapons is perhaps the most suitable entry point for Canada and also for Japan to come on board and work with civil society and states parties to the TPNW. Participating in the second meeting of state parties next November as observers to contributing to victim assistance would be a right and practical step forward. I'm convinced we can make a change. It may take time, but we can and we will eventually make Canada and Japan sign the TPNW and be on the right side of the history. Collaboration of civil society beyond national borders and generations will be key. I'm feeling strong hope in the fact that more and more young people are joining this movement in Japan, inspired by the adoption and entry into force of the TPNW. Those young people are now participating in the dialogues with the governments and parliamentarians. I hope you make waves in Canada too. Let us work together and make change for our common future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kawasaki, for that powerful, informed presentation and your good advice for us as well. I would now like to introduce, speaking of youth, our youth speaker this evening, Rosh Ali. Rosh Ali worked with fellow student Avinash Singh to gain the City of Winnipeg's support for the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And this was part of the youth-led International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons Cities Appeal, the ICAN Cities Appeal. Since 2019, Ms. Ali has been participating in a number of nuclear disarmament initiatives as co-chair of the Youth Nuclear Peace Summit, as youth coordinator of Reverse the Trend, Save Our Planet, Save Our People, as a member of the Canadian Council of Young Feminists, and as a participant in the Hiroshima ICAN Academy. Welcome, Rosh.
Thank you so much for having me. It is really an honor to be present for this important event that commemorates the horrific events that happened in 1945. As a speaker today and as someone who will be speaking on my own experiences in working on the ICAN Cities Appeal, I would like to take a moment and say that the work that I did alongside my colleague and alongside other youth happened in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which is Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. In our work and in my, as I continued to progress in all of this, I found that there's often a voice missing in these kinds of discussions, and that is the voice of civil society. The simple fact that the events of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had to occur for the world to take notice, truly, and take a leading step forward to say that this should never happen again is horrific. And it is unfortunate that today over 13,000 nuclear weapons still stand. When one is too many, and even the use of one can cause catastrophic consequences to generations to come. As Mr. Kawasaki and Mrs. Thurlow said before me and spoke on their experiences, the experiences of people, whether at the hands of nuclear weapons use or their implementation or their basic growth, even in terms of mining or building, it is affecting all kinds of people, not just those that were impacted in the atomic bombings. And that fact alone should be more than enough reason for countries outside of Japan, which was the only country that was affected in the event of a nuclear bomb. Countries that have residents who experience mining and testing need to take a step forward and say that this mustn't happen again. I have a presentation to share which kind of speaks on some of what I had been able to do successfully in Winnipeg and what we're hoping to do moving forward as well. Unfortunately, Canada is not a signatory to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which raises a lot of questions, as in the past, Canada has been a supporter for the Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1970. And over the years, Canada has actively shown an effort towards peace and towards helping those who are in need, especially in their steps forward with, for example, bringing in refugees and immigrants. These are just an example of Canada's very active effort in creating a space that is very diverse and safe. But it also raises the question that if Canada is a supporter to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, why hasn't it joined the discussion of the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons? And that is where the work of the ICANN Cities Appeal came into play for myself. It was an opportunity for me and my colleague to take this work and bring it to a local level. And we were able to do so by carefully navigating the bureaucratic process of Winnipeg with support from various advisors and countless organizations that have stood by our side. In our efforts, we were able to get the City of Winnipeg's support, but we also wanted to echo the message that this work is continuous. I have been very fortunate to attend the Hiroshima ICANN Academy, which taught me many things, and I was able to hear some strong testimonies and hear of the work that people in this movement have been doing for decades before me. I, as a youth and as an 18-year-old activist, as I would say, I've also been very fortunate to be able to attend the first meeting of state parties for the TPNW this past June, that I was graciously supported by the Rotary Club of Winnipeg and Rotary District 5550, as well as at the time an internship with Senator Mary Lou McPhedran. I see myself as simply an extension of an arm of a great network of youth. I do not see myself as a key point and speaker for all of this, but simply as a member of a greater movement that is happening and someone who is actively participating in this work and who was able to get the ICANN Cities Appeal working forward. Here's a picture of me with some of my colleagues and some of the people that I have had the opportunity to meet at last year's Lanterns for Peace to commemorate the atomic bombings. This was done in Winnipeg by Peace Alliance Winnipeg. And this was one of those opportunities where I was able to be in a physical presence of people who are descendants of survivors of Hibakusha. And I was fortunate to do so. But it again brought me to raise the question of why is this still a concern? Why is it that till this day, in many of the conversations that come up in discussions, why is it that countries need to witness horrific events and catastrophes and suffering of hundreds of thousands of people for a real discussion to take place and for real evident change to happen? Why is it that younger people of generations that were not present during these events are needing to take that step forward and take the lead on something that should have never been even a concern to begin with? And why is it that till this day, in the year that we live in today, 2022, that there is still so much debate on whether it is humane or not to use these weapons? It just raises many, many questions for myself and my colleagues. And why is deterrence the key factor in striving conversation that our leaders tend to take? Why is it not that peace and the betterment of humankind? These are the kinds of questions that I ask myself, and oftentimes that I'm met with when I speak to others about this who have not had much of their own experience or are not familiar with the topic. Because unfortunately, as I've come to learn, and as many people present for this event today know, this is unfortunately has gotten brushed under the rug one too many times. And in saying that, many people have lost touch with how horrific the events have been, and how even as Canada, who does not own or possess any nuclear weapons, is such an active player in their production. So it raises the question of how us as Canadians and us across the world are needed to take the step forward. And the TPNW is the place to go. The TPNW is the plan moving forward. As the state parties of the NPT, not particularly the NPT, but as nuclear state parties stated, nuclear war can never be won and must never be fought. As they have said this in the past, I believe that this is a sentiment that needs to stand true till this day, because we are only at the start of this. And with looking at how the last 6 months have progressed with the events occurring in Ukraine, it raises many more questions in saying that if the conversation of deterrence is this key factor behind this work and behind countries' resistance to the TPNW, then why are the events of Ukraine still ongoing, more nuclear weapons, the strong baseline of Russia's stance on this. If deterrence is really possible, then we mustn't have ever gotten to this point. Yet it is still evident that deterrence is not the answer. Deterrence has not been successful in preventing these catastrophic events. And in saying that, I stand strong along with all of the others in being able to attend this event today, and which is truly an honor and carries a lot of weight in itself, because as I am able to share these experiences of my own, I'm also hearing the experiences of those that came before me. And it is frustrating more than anything for myself, as well as my peers and those that I work with, to understand that although these horrible events have to take place for people to, especially our leaders, to take notice, it is even worse that the survivors of these events are needing to continuously recount their experiences and trauma over and over again in order to draw the attention of our leaders and draw the attention of those who are working in positions of power. I was fortunate to be met with great support from my City Council of Winnipeg, but I understand that that is not the same case for all of the others that are wanting to pursue their own campaigns. Yet I also don't believe that that should be a discouraging factor in this work. If anything, seeing other cities and local municipalities be successful in their work should be encouragement that civil society really does have power. And in cases where we are met with discouragement, we are also reminded that in the past, action has been successful, such as in 1985, when the world saw a drastic decrease in nuclear weapons arsenal because of the actions of civil society and because of the ongoing efforts that took place. So it is important to remind each other that efforts are not in vain. They are not in vain, and they are successful. Although there is a long ways to go, and we really mustn't forget that although it has been many, many years, and 77 years since the events of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it is not to say that those events might not happen again, because it is still within the last 100 years that those events happened, and till this day, nuclear weapons are continuously being progressed. So if one at the time in 1945 was able to create that level of damage and kill over 200,000 people and leave many more displaced and disabled, then it is terrifying to even imagine what a weapon today at the level that they've been advanced are able to do, with over 13,000 existing in the world. There are many questions that I continue to ask myself, many questions that I am asked by my peers, who to them at times this is not work that is prevalent for them. There are other things that people tend to focus on at different points in their lives. But it is not to take away from the fact that till this day, we still have survivors remaining, such as Ms. Thurlow. And I believe as long as we have those survivors remaining, and as long as we have people who have experienced nuclear testing, we must take to listen to them, even though that means they're having to recount their traumas countless times. It is with their stories that we are able to understand that this is not that far away of a danger. And it is still prevalent today and occurring today that these people are needing to tell their stories, and that we are needing to call onto our governments to take this threat seriously and not to look past it. As the NPT conference occurs now, and as the second meeting of state parties for the TPNW happens in November, I really hope to see more youth present and more members of civil society take notice of what's going on, and especially to no longer have to rely on those that were present for these events to constantly have to retell the stories, because the trauma that they had to go through at the time is unimaginable, but them having to retell their traumas over and over again is also another weight to carry. But I take careful time to listen to them, and also to understand that I am one part of a much greater movement that's happening, and one part of some phenomenal work that's going on that I really do strongly believe is able to go much further. I really hope to see that level of encouragement continues, and that the people present on this call, who many of which I recognize and who are great supporters of mine and who I'm very happy to work closely with, are able to continue to extend their warmth towards others who are new to all of this work and who may at first be ignorant to the topic. It does take time, but I, in my own life and in my own work, hope that I can continue to see growth in all of this, and also take the moment to thank those around me for allowing me a place to speak and speak on my own experiences, as I hope to continue my work with the Cities Appeal with Reverse the Trend Canada, as we are doing now, and work alongside other organizations that are also doing very impactful work that is evident that change is happening and it is not to be unnoticed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ali, for your impassioned plea to all of us and your encouragement. I would now like to invite Dr. Vinay Jindal to moderate question and answer period. We invite all participants to post your questions in the chat. Yes, I'll pass it over to Dr. Jindal now. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. So I am honored to be part of the Hiroshima-Nagasaki Day Coalition. I've been with the coalition for many years, and it's an honor to work with so many people in the peace community in Toronto and get to know the peace community. There is one question in the chat room. For the second meeting of the signatories in November, who would Canada be expected to send as a representative? Would it be the Prime Minister or the Minister of Foreign Affairs or someone else? Roj, since you were talking a little bit about the meeting in November, who would you like to see present on behalf of Canada?
Myself, when I was attending for example, when I was attending the first meeting of state parties for the TPNW, I attended alongside Senator Mary Lou McPherson of Canada, who was unofficially, not on behalf of Canada, attending on her own work. Personally, I would really want to see someone in Parliament to do so. I think an MP is a great start. Definitely, I would most like to see someone who is at the highest level, but I think in terms of Canada and Canada being such a strong leader in peace, I would personally want to see someone who is a great representation of the people in Canada and what the people's needs are in Canada. As many Canadians are not in support of nuclear weapons, I would most want to see someone who echoes that passion towards disarmament, and who members of civil society can recognize themselves in, as it is much more, I believe, much more reflective of the work that's happening within Canada.
And Setsuko, as you've been campaigning with ICANN and the TPNW, who would you like to see represent Canada if they were to attend?
Well, I agree with Ruth. I think it's a must. We have to send the politician, members of parliament, and they have greater link and the power. And I think it's a must. But I saw a lot of women politicians and national delegates attending New York conference, and as well as Vienna conference. I would like to see more women's participation. I would like to see, and of course, youth. And I was delighted to see such increasing number of younger people participating in this political process, and we have to encourage that. Yeah.
Thank you, Setsuko. There's one more question in the chat room, so I'll pose that to Akira first, and then after that, we'll go back to Rosemary. Question, would not a no first use policy for nuclear weapons go a long way to preventing nuclear war until we achieve nuclear disarmament?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, for countries like Canada or Japan, discussing at the political level on the option of no first use can be certainly be relevant as a way to reducing the role of nuclear weapons and going away from the dependence on nuclear deterrence. So, but I think the important thing is to have the policymakers question the relevance of nuclear deterrence, and in that process, various options, interim measures can be discussed, and I think no first use can be such an option. But I don't think no first use is not the goal. It's just one step. How to say? One interim step for a bigger goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Setsuko, Roj, would you like to add to your comments?
Well, I want to put, can I just add my opinion? Well,
definitely.
This is not responding to your question, but before we close this meeting, I want to share with everybody what I have seen and why I'm so encouraged. Well, the past 10 years or so, humanitarian initiative really mobilized, galvanized the world, and people came and wanted to put the humanity in the front and center of our discussion of the nuclear weapon issue. And a great deal of attention has been directed to the long forgotten, neglected victims of the faraway land where decisions made in Washington and Moscow, the actual production of nuclear weapons had to depend on the suffering of indigenous people. And this issue of trying to reduce the pain and trying to bring the justice to the suffering victims in the faraway places, in the Pacific Islands, in Kazakhstan or Africa, and so on. And that became one of the major issues of the discussion at the Vienna conference. And great work has been done, reports has been made, and now we have to start working on that and get the government to take better responsibility, especially the nuclear weapon states who has been irresponsible, just allowing those indigenous people suffer. And we must bring justice in their lives. And this was the very strong issue. And I was very, very, more than anything perhaps, interested. And I'd like to report that to the world. Maybe others can add to that.
Thank you. So thank you. And with that, I'll send it back to Rosemary to continue with the program.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Setsuko, for those hopeful remarks. I would, and leading right into the next section is our action pledge. And following the action pledge, we will have closing remarks and of course our lantern ceremony. But right now, following on the words of all our speakers, I would like Roj to help us out by reading our action pledge. It's displayed on the screen. Roj.
Thank you for asking me to read this pledge. On this commemoration day, we say, no more Hiroshimas, no more Nagasakis, never again on planet Earth. As we promised to those destroyed by the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, this is our pledge to ensure the continued existence of mankind and a future for our children free of the threat of nuclear annihilation. Thank you. The pledge. Today, with people around the world, we commit ourselves to cooperate with states, parliamentarians, and civil society in efforts to stigmatize, prohibit, and eliminate nuclear weapons for the sake of humanity and to prevent unthinkable horror before it is too late.
We do have some more slides for the pledge, ways for people to get involved. I think what we will do is we will make sure that following our event tonight, we'll make sure that you receive an email with these. But would you go ahead, Rouge? I think there are 2 or 3 more slides that tell us exactly what we can do.
Yes, of course. Some of the ways in which we can take the next steps forward is involve our elected officials, which includes encouraging your municipality to do as 19 Canadian municipalities have done and call on the government of Canada to support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And attached there is the link to the ICANN website. Another is write to our parliamentarians. Contact your MP to arrange a meeting. Ask them to send a note to the Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister, urging their support for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Write a letter to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the link is present there as well.
Go ahead, Roche.
Yes. Continuing on with that, there is also the option of support compensation for victims of nuclear weapons. You are able to support the victims of nuclear weapons use and testing at over 200 sites around the world. The links for such are listed below as well. And the last option, as well as amongst many more, is not to invest in nuclear weapons. It is important to find out if your financial institutions are supporting the nuclear weapons industry in all of this. And there are more links present.
Thank you very much, Roche, for reading those for us. And as I say, we hope to share them with people following this webinar. I would like to express our deep appreciation to all of this evening's presenters for your clear, strong, inspirational messages and for your unwavering commitment to the abolition of nuclear weapons. You have shown us what we can do. You have encouraged us. You have given us tools to take action. You have given us hope. To all the participants, thank you for joining us. Please now enjoy Ron Cord's music once more as we conclude with the lantern ceremony, the virtual lantern ceremony, commemorating those whose lives were lost in the atomic bombings, just as they are commemorated in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thank you.